Hello, everybody. Welcome to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and I'm here to learn some facts with you about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends, all while relaxing and sometimes going a little bit off topic. So it's been maybe around 2 days. It's been a busy time for me around this time, but I see a lot of you guys very much enjoyed the last koala episode. I for sure did. I learned a lot about those interesting little guys. And today we're going to be going into the sloth, another personal favorite of mine. I absolutely love these guys. They're incredibly adorable, and I just wanted to talk about really quickly about where this podcast is kind of headed. So I believe this is episode 10, or going on episode 10, or just around that mark. And soon, what I would like to do is open up just a social media account, just where I can interact with you guys in terms of maybe polls and stuff as to what animals you would like to see in the near future. But for right now, until that happens, if you guys have any animal suggestions that you would personally like to see on the podcast, probably an animal that I would like to learn about, you can always send an email to relaxwithanimалfacts@gmail.com. And yeah, we can have a back and forth, and I'd like to just kind of see what you guys would like to hear about on the podcast. Also, if you have any kind of maybe theme song submissions or anything like that, absolutely, it is all appreciated. Any kind of contact with you guys, I appreciate that. So let's go through a few things for any of those new listeners out there. So as I said before, this is a podcast where I kind of sit here with my tea and learn about some facts with you about an animal of of my choosing, or just something that I've kind of seen before, or would like to learn more about, and kind of share it with you guys. So I go on the internet, I find some facts, and I read it here with you guys and learn. So that's what it's all about. It's about learning with you guys. So there's a few ways that you can listen to the podcast. You could be lying down, maybe on a comfy couch somewhere, comfy sofa. You could be sitting down on a nice chair. You could even be walking around, or maybe you're in bed ready to go to sleep. However you want to listen to this podcast, it's absolutely your choice. This podcast is here to help you kind of wind down, get your mind focused on some animal facts, and you can just learn, because we all have so many things we have to do nowadays, that it's always nice to take some time to yourself and learn about sloths in this case. So I'm going to say where I got my facts from this time. Surprisingly, did nothing from Discover Wildlife this time. They've been my main source for a while. But from globalanimal.org, surprising sloth facts, and worldanimalprotection.ca. And they have 10 facts about sloths. So those are my sources, and we're going to go right into the show. So there are two types of sloth. There's two-toed sloths and there's three-toed sloths. I personally didn't know that. I thought there was only one kind of sloth, but I guess there's two-toed and three-toed. But it says here that it can actually get confusing, as both actually have three claws or toes on their hind limbs. In reality, the two-toed sloth should be really called the two-fingered sloth, because the difference is actually found on their front limbs. That is interesting. Why it's if it's on their front limbs, usually it's not something to do with toes. But in the case of the majority of, I think they're called the quadruped animals that don't walk bipedally like humans do, that just means that we walk on two legs upright. I guess for them, all of their limbs are toes in a way. But even the sloth, is able to kind of stand up a little bit just to reach out with their front limbs. So I think that they should be called two-fingered sloth. But maybe I think two-toed, three-toed sounds, it kind of rolls off the tongue. It's a little bit easier to say. So when it says two-toed and three-toed, it actually has to do with differences on their front limbs rather than on their hind limbs, which is what I intuitively think of. So I guess that's an important distinction. This next fact I think is really interesting because it says that sloths are clumsy on land. Well, clumsy is a strong word. I think that they're kind of slower on land, but they are actually very good swimmers. Yeah, something that I did not imagine. A sloth being able to swim. I thought that if they move like that on land, in the water, it would be an impossible task for them because now you don't have air resistance, you have water resistance, which is much stronger. But in the case of sloths, they have a much easier time in the water, it seems like. Or not much easier time, but they can swim fairly quickly, relative to how they move on land. And they can actually hold their breath for an astounding 40 minutes. 40 minutes, that's incredible. We've discussed some different aquatic animals, such as the beluga whale. I forgot what the other one was. No, not coming to my mind. But the beluga whale, for example, I think was 25 minutes or 15 to 25 minutes, somewhere in that range. But an animal that is mostly land-based, arboreal, 40 minutes underwater. But this is because they actually have an ability to kind of suppress their metabolism and make their heart rate actually a third of its normal speed. So they have these kind of autonomic responses to being in water. At least I believe it's autonomic. I guess it would be really hard to determine whether this is a conscious action. Autonomic just meaning that this is an automatic response, right? Automatic. And as opposed to voluntary. So just like human beings have autonomic responses, right, with anything, such as with our fight or flight or things like that. I guess with the sloth, it didn't actually specify. So 40 minutes, in terms of human beings, I think we've discussed this, is around 22 minutes and 22 seconds, I think was the world record for how long a human could hold their breath for. And these little guys, these happy little guys, they can hold their breath for 40 minutes by suppressing their metabolism and making their heart rate a little lower, a third of its speed, in fact. A quick little aside, I know that there's this sport that I always forget the name of it, but it's that one where people ski, or they do some cross-country skiing, and then they stop to shoot, like a target of some sort with this little gun that they have. And it's really important that they're able to kind of control their heart rate in a way, because after you're kind of skiing really quickly, trying to get to where you got to go, it's kind of a test to voluntary control over some things that are deemed to be autonomic, such as heart rate. But you can increase and decrease your heart rate different ways. Like holding your breath will increase your heart rate because that's how your body responds to the lack of oxygen or the excess CO2. And it's I think it's interesting that there's people that kind of master this ability to utilize their heart in a way that pumps quickly, and then they have to stop, lower their heart rate so they can get an accurate shot. And I assume that sloths just do this automatically. So they would be good at, maybe not the cross-country part, but use their two toes to kind of ski around. Anyways, sloths are arboreal animals, as I've mentioned, and they spend most of their time in trees. So this is fairly common knowledge. So they really enjoy being in trees. It has vegetation for them to kind of munch on all the time, and it also provides them a sanctuary in a way from some animals or from some predators that have a harder time being able to hunt up in the trees. Not with all predators, of course. We're going to be talking about what their natural predators are and kind of that relationship. So they spend most of their time in trees, and that's how they like it there. And the modern sloth is around the size of a medium-sized dog, they say. But ancient sloths, if you guys have ever heard of those giant sloths, years ago they were known as Megatherium, and they could grow as large as an Asian elephant. So look at that, guys. This is actually tying pretty well to the elephant episode. If you guys didn't listen to that episode, go ahead and listen to that another time. But we talked about African elephants and Asian elephants. Asian elephants are about, I think they were 9 feet tall and about 4,000 kilograms. So that's, close to 9,000 pounds. So imagine a sloth that is 9 feet tall, so larger than any human being that has ever existed, at least to our knowledge now. That's incredible. And these giant sloths sometimes featured areas of small bone discs that would actually be like armor plating for protection. So just like I guess human beings have had armor for protection that we built, they had this natural kind of plating for protection, and they actually became extinct around 10,000 years ago. So if we're talking about evolutionary history, right, if we look at the history of the Earth is, gosh, I think it's 4.6 billion years old. I believe that's the number. So if we're talking about relative time, 10,000 years ago is very recent. That's not a long time ago, really. I would actually like to research more as to why the Megatherium went extinct in the first place. I guess changing environment, one thing that's had a great impact is the amount of oxygen we have in our atmosphere but that was compared to, millions and millions of years ago, dinosaur times when oxygen was so rich, which is why you had, huge insects and giant plants and vegetation and whatnot, and animals to that degree. But 10,000 years ago, that's very recent. I would like to research that a little bit more. And the impressive biology of a sloth allows it to spend 90% of its life hanging upside down. And studies show that this is possible because, unlike us, their organs are actually attached to the rib cage, which means that they don't actually weigh down on the lungs. And that means that, unlike us, a sloth can actually hang upside down, and there's no effect on its pulmonary ventilation or breathing, just breathing in general, on its respiration. Because we have rib cages as well, but our organs aren't kind of stuck to the inside of our thoracic cage. It's just kind of, the rib cage acts as just a sort of barrier there, but it doesn't. There's no actual adhesion to any kind of internal organs there. So I think this is interesting. That's why they can hang upside down. And that is a good reason why hanging upside down for humans is not a very good idea. With blood rushing to your head, and of course, we don't have this kind of protective mechanism to be able to hang upside down to protect our ventilation. Sloths actually only go to the bathroom about once a week. That includes number 1 and number 2, for any of you guys wondering. I just thought that was interesting. Once or twice or once a week. Comparing that to human beings, you do not want to be only urinating once a week. That would be incredibly bad. But for sloths, that seems to be the balance that they've struck, and that just shows how different kind of animals can be in the animal kingdom, right? Depending on their metabolic processes and all these different sort of things. These animals are so sloths are such a unique and different sort of animal, and I'm already surprised. We're only a few facts in, and the fact that they can swim really well and that they can hold their breath for 40 minutes and they only go to the bathroom once a week. These are things that are not intuitive to me at all. So let's move on to the other one. And they actually, talking about number 1 and number 2, they actually like to go to the same place every time because of this, they're actually pretty vulnerable to predators because they have, I guess they like to pick a spot kind of like nature's litter box in a way and go in the same spot every time. As to the reason of this, I'm not sure. Maybe sloths just like to have, maybe they're organized. They like to put, this is where this happens, just like I guess human beings have a place to go generally in their house, right? It's not like, okay, one day we go to the bathroom and the other day we go in the living room, and so maybe this is the sloth's way of establishing where a toilet is. This animal facts episode has gone a little bit into a little bit grosser than the other ones, but that's okay. We're moving on past number 1 and number 2 now. And contrary to their reputation, sloths only sleep about 10 hours a day. And that whole only sleeping part, is all relative, because as we learned with giraffes, right, they only sleep 15 to or 5 to 30 minutes a day or something like that. So incredibly small times. So only sleeping a certain amount of time, it's all relative, just like with the koala, right, where we learned last episode that they like to sleep a very large chunk of their day. That's 18 to 20 hours a day. But with sloths sleeping only 10 hours a day, I assume that they slept a little bit more. But in the case of them moving very, very slowly, I see how them sleeping too much would actually be detrimental, because, once they've kind of cleared out an area of food, if they're only sleeping, if they're only awake 2 to 4 hours a day, like a koala is, it could be pretty difficult to get to a new spot fast enough, right? To find a new area of vegetation. And talking about their diet, it consists mainly of leaves, those tender shoots and buds, but they do sometimes actually supplement their diet, if need be, with insects and even small birds. Something that I can't imagine. I don't know what kind of birds are in the business of getting eaten by sloths. I mean, you could probably see that claw coming from a mile away, I imagine. So I don't know how that happens. Maybe there's a video online that I could watch to see what's how that chase happens. I'm sure it would be pretty entertaining. But they all supplement their diet with insects and it said small birds. But mainly, they have those leaves, those shoots, and the buds, whatever they can really find. And if you've ever seen a sloth in the wild, you'll sometimes see that they actually get this kind of green coloration. And this isn't because they're dyeing their fur green. It's actually because algae will grow on their fur. So, because they live in these environments that you can have a kind of moist sort of air and warm, and they do swim from time to time, they can actually get this algae on their fur, which in this case is again a symbiotic relationship. So we've learned what that word means, right? With symbiotic, it just means symbiosis just refers to these two kind of organisms that interact in a way that's beneficial to both. So in this case, algae has a place to grow, and it provides the sloth with camouflage. So camouflage is a very important aspect of many species all around the world in order to help them survive against predation, whatever that predator might be, or predators, plural. In the case of sloths, they do have predators, not just one. But that's actually an adaptive symbiotic relationship, and I think that's really interesting. I just love how nature finds its balances and has these special relationships. That's why I appreciate animals and nature so much. And sloths' diets, because they consist of mostly leaves, this gives them minimal energy and nutrition, which kind of makes sense because of that means that they have slower metabolisms. That means that they move slower. And this is, I guess, why they're able to slow down their metabolism in a way, and they have these lower resting heart rates. Actually, that last part, I don't know if that's true. Lower resting heart rates. I just know from the swimming fact that they can lower their heart rate by a third. But I assume that their heart rate would be lower. I don't know. Maybe that's another interesting thing. And one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the podcast that I usually mention is if you ever hear about an animal that you find interesting and you'd like to learn more about, because a lot of these facts are either super specific, super general, or maybe just something interesting, I always encourage you guys to go and watch some documentaries. I know that David Attenborough, in terms of commentating kind of documentaries and stuff, he has a really nice voice. But I know he did one with sloths on Netflix. But if you guys find anything or hear about any animal that you would like to learn about, or maybe all the animals interest you, I always encourage you to research more. Maybe when another time after you're done relaxing, or just whenever you have free time, to get passionate about animals, because I personally love them. I could talk about them and research all day. But let's move on to the next fact. Sloths can actually retain their grip after they pass, which is interesting. So you can, if once a sloth kind of passes, they can actually still hang from trees, which is interesting. I don't really know why. I didn't dig too deep into that fact. Maybe it has something to do with stiffness after they die, and they're able to just kind of grip onto the branch. Their body just stays that way, which is very odd to me. That's a very odd. Again, something that's totally counterintuitive to me. I would have never guessed that in a million years. So let's talk about their predators really quickly. So sloth's primary predators, they include eagles, snakes, and jaguars. So the trees provide a sense of protection in the way that they actually will be covered by brush sometimes or whatnot. Their camouflage acts very well in those environments. But of course, eagles can fly. Snakes, there are a lot of snakes that climb trees, believe it or not. And jaguars, I believe they can climb. At least I intuitively, I think so. I don't think that they would like to spend too much time in trees. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm not sure. Jaguars is actually, I was actually thinking about doing another podcast episode about jaguars. So I guess we'll learn when that podcast comes. But yeah, so those are their three main predators. And something interesting is that three-toed sloths can actually turn their heads close to about 360 degrees. So just like the owl has these kind of interesting mechanisms that allows them to move their head in this way, sloths have an extra vertebrae that is at the base of their neck. So I guess, but they say extra vertebrae. I don't know how many they have. If it's in comparison to humans, we've learned in the giraffe episode that human beings have 7 vertebrae in our cervical spine. So if it says extra vertebrae in relation to humans, then maybe they have 8. But there's also a bunch of other things here that would be in play. It's not just extra vertebrae. The reason human beings can't really turn our head past a certain point is not only because we're restricted by vertebrae, we're restricted by blood vessels, things like arteries, like our carotid artery or other kind of very important arteries that supply the brain. So with owls, I know that they have extra, those bones in their cervical spine have different anatomical structure to allow arteries to not be cut off when they turn their head a certain way, because with human beings that is absolutely not the case. So I'd actually like to look more into that, because turning their heads about 360 degrees, it can't just be because they have an extra vertebrae at their base of their neck. They have to have a different pathway for vessels to travel, so nothing gets kind of interrupted. I imagine. So that's an interesting one. Sloths are nocturnal animals. This I did not know. That is a completely new fact to me as I read it now. Not intuitive to me at all. As to why they're nocturnal, maybe it's a safer adaptation, allows them to live longer lives. But I assume because eagles are not nocturnal, and jaguars, I don't believe, are. Maybe they sometimes hunt during the night. I'm not exactly sure. But snakes, a lot of them are nocturnal. So that's interesting. I'm not really sure. But they're nocturnal animals. And they actually have up to 4-inch claws that are used to hold onto tree branches. So just we learned that they have these different kind of toes, or what they refer to as the 2-toed, 3-toed sloths. They have 4-inch long claws that they use to hold onto those tree branches. And it looks effortless to them. So 4-inch long claws, if you were wondering how long they actually are. And sloths are fairly solitary creatures, and they only really gather to mate. So they like their space. They don't really have, to my knowledge, the same, just like the last episode, like koalas. They're also solitary creatures, only gathering to mate. But koalas have home ranges, just areas where it's kind of dedicated to them. That's their area. And they overlap with other koalas sometimes. But with sloths, I don't believe that they have kind of this set range. At least nothing that I could read about. It's possible, but I didn't read about it. So this is actually, that's 2 similarities between koalas and sloths. So interesting. Female sloths are normally pregnant for 7 to 10 months, and will only give birth to one baby at a time. Is it possible for them to have twins? I'm not sure. I don't know. So their gestation period ranges it's that 3-month range from 7 to 10 months. So with humans, 9 months. It's actually fairly similar to the gestation period. And sloths can actually live up to 40 years old, so very close to gorillas. We learned about gorillas before on another episode. So they can live up to 40 years old, so fairly old, which is interesting. I mean, because they move kind of slowly, I didn't imagine that they had too short a lifespan. And if you've seen sloths before, you know they're very charismatic and lovable, and everybody thinks they're adorable because they have that appearance that they're always smiling. But that is not necessarily the case that they are ecstatic at that moment, or constantly content, or whatever it be. Because they will actually smile even if they are experiencing any kind of pain or stress, because that is just how their facial structure is. This is anatomical, right? It's not something that they are doing on purpose. Although they say it takes fewer muscles to smile than to frown. But the sloth is always smiling, no matter what, even if it's experiencing pain. So I think that's an interesting little tidbit there. And let's talk about something really quickly. So this is our last sort of fact. Wow, this episode flew by. I didn't go. There were so many facts about this amazing animal because everyone loves them. But let's talk about something that you can do personally to help these little guys out. There was actually studies that found that selfies are not very good for many animals in the Amazon. So in the Amazon, there's so many diverse animals, like river dolphins, like dolphins, or pink. I believe they're pink, like pink river dolphins and sloths and different kinds of animals. But selfies are actually a huge detriment to these guys. In the example of the sloth, they typically they live sleepy, kind of quiet lives. And being surrounded by humans and constant noise and they can't get away from it, that actually causes them a lot of distress, because this is not what they're used to. And although they look like they're always smiling, they actually don't really want hugs. They just want to chill. They just want to relax. So if you ever go to the Amazon or you go somewhere with sloths, they don't actually like to be held very much. And being around humans and surrounded by humans, if you ever go to the Amazon, which would be an amazing experience, try not to interrupt these guys too much. You can of course you could take pictures as much as you want if they're in their natural habitat and they're kind of at peace. But being around humans all the time, and with that constant noise of being all close to them with flashing cameras and with everything, that actually doesn't do a lot of good for them. It actually causes them a lot of stress. So it's not something you can do at this immediate moment, but just awareness that these guys don't actually like to be disturbed too much. So they'll have an even bigger smile on their face if you don't kind of take a selfie, right? While kind of cradling them in your arms. While that sounds adorable, it's not in the best interest of the sloth at all. So anybody that's new to the podcast, you don't know that I always enjoy ending the show with a kind of a little tidbit or like a historical thing about where the word of like the name of the animal actually comes from. So we've done that with every episode. I hope I didn't forget one episode, but I believe that's all episodes. And the word sloth actually means inclined to laziness and inaction. Of course, this is a kind of an appropriate, when you look from the outside in to a sloth, how it moves so slow and whatnot. I can see where this came from. So I think it's kind of interesting, and it's pretty appropriate. Although they haven't seen a sloth swim before, so maybe if it was instead of being called sloth, if they saw them in the water, maybe they would even have named it Phelps instead. So it's a little joke there, but that's the show, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed that little journey into the into the Amazon to learn about sloths. So again, if you have any kind of questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, you can always send me an email at relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com. Social media will be coming in the near future for you guys to be able to vote on what animals you'd like next. So just wait for that. Yeah, I enjoyed this experience with you guys. If you enjoyed it, make sure to you can follow the podcast on Spotify, and you can share it. That really helps the show out a lot if you share it with people that maybe would also like to relax with animal facts. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.